down 29 points at home in Game 4 of the NBA Finals, down 27 at halftime, the biggest halftime deficit ever seen in Finals history, still trailing by 20 with just 9 minutes left on the clock. Then, right there inside Madison Square Garden, history flipped upside down as the greatest comeback the Finals have ever seen unfolded in front of a shocked crowd. In the back court, Fox has a chance to get it. Fox has it inside, blocked by Anunoby. Most people watched that game and came away with one conclusion: the Spurs completely collapsed. And when a team blows a 29-point lead on basketball's biggest stage, that's the headline everybody wants to run with. But that's only part of the story. The truth is, the Knicks didn't pull this off because of some lucky shooting stretch, a favorable whistle, or a random switch that suddenly changed everything in the fourth quarter. The foundation for this comeback had been built all season long, and honestly, even before that, during last year's playoff run, the habits that carried New York through tough moments were already there. When you're down 29, those habits get pushed to the absolute edge, and San Antonio learned exactly what happens when they hold up under pressure. That's why, even though people will remember this as the wildest comeback in Finals history, the bigger story is actually pretty straightforward. This was New York being exactly who they've been all year long: relentless, physical, annoying to put away. The Spurs just happened to find themselves on the wrong side of it when the stakes were at their highest. Today, we're breaking down the 3 biggest reasons a 29-point deficit turned into the most unbelievable comeback the Finals have ever witnessed, and how those same strengths exposed San Antonio when the pressure hit its peak. On the surface, this is one of the greatest comebacks basketball has ever seen, and there's no debate about that. The Knicks erased a massive 29-point deficit in front of a stunned Madison Square Garden crowd and grabbed what could end up being the most important win this franchise has seen in decades, maybe even the biggest of all. It felt impossible. It felt over long before the fourth quarter should have even started, yet somehow New York found a way. But there's something people don't really talk about. The comeback itself wasn't as shocking as the score made it seem. If you've watched this Knicks team closely, you've seen versions of this before. As a neutral fan, there was never a point where New York felt completely finished. This group has built a reputation for hanging around long enough to make things uncomfortable. You only have to look back a few weeks. In Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks pulled off another jaw-dropping rally, wiping out a 22-point fourth quarter deficit against Cleveland before winning 115-104 in overtime at the Garden. With less than 8 minutes remaining, the Cavaliers led 93-71. The arena had gone quiet. Fans were stunned. Cleveland looked fully in control. Then everything changed. New York exploded offensively, tightened up defensively, and closed regulation plus overtime on an incredible 44-11 run that completely flipped the game. And the wild part? That comeback wasn't some one-time event. Across the last 2 postseasons, the Knicks have erased deficits of 20 points or more 4 different times. At some point, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. When a team keeps pulling off the same type of comeback again and again, it stops looking like luck and starts looking like identity. Last year might have been even crazier. During the 2025 Eastern Conference semifinals against Boston, New York fell behind by 20 points in the third quarter of both Game 1 and Game 2. In each game, the response was nearly identical. They chipped away possession by possession, turned up the defensive pressure, stormed back late, grabbed the lead during the final minutes, and walked away with victories. Those wins made them the first team in NBA history to erase 20-point deficits in back-to-back playoff games. Just like that, they stole a 2-0 series lead from the Celtics, and they still weren't finished. A week later, facing the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals and already down 0-2 in the series, New York found itself staring at another 20-point deficit late in the first half of Game 3. Most teams would have folded. The Knicks did what they've become known for doing. They kept swinging, clawed their way back into the game, and earned a 106-100 win. In the process, they became the first team in NBA history to pull off 3 separate 20-point playoff comebacks in a single postseason. And now, 1 year later, they've taken it even further. Another deep playoff run, more 20-point deficits, more impossible-looking situations, and now they're sitting just 1 win away from bringing home the franchise's first championship in more than 50 years. That brings us to one number number, 5-3. That's New York's record when trailing by 20 points or more across the last 2 postseasons. The rest of the NBA combined, just 4-71 in those same situations. Think about that for a second. The Knicks alone have more 20-point comeback victories than every other team in the league combined. That's not normal, that's not random. It's become their biggest weapon. So how do they keep pulling this off? It comes down to a mindset that separates them from almost everyone else. Most teams fall behind by 20 and start feeling the weight of the scoreboard. The game begins to look decided. Every missed shot feels bigger. Every mistake feels fatal. The comeback starts feeling impossible. The Knicks don't look at it that way. To them, a huge deficit isn't one giant problem. It's a series of smaller problems that need to be solved one possession at a time. Get a stop, hit a shot, force a turnover, survive a bad possession, do it again, and then do it again after that. It doesn't work every time, but it works often enough to make opponents nervous. That's how New York became the first team since the 1975 Warriors to record double-digit comeback wins in each of the first 2 finals games of a series. Then came Game 4, and this comeback had a completely different feel to it. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't built on chaos. It was slow, calculated, and almost machine-like. Most teams erase huge deficits with a sudden burst of momentum. A barrage of three-pointers, a crowd eruption, a stretch where everything goes right at once. That's usually how these stories are written. The Knicks write theirs differently. A few weeks earlier, after the comeback against Cleveland, Jalen Brunson basically summed up the entire approach in one simple message. Keep fighting, keep chipping away. We're not gonna get it back in one possession. That's the blueprint right there. The Knicks don't chase miracle plays. They focus on the next play. Instead of one massive momentum swing, they slowly wear teams down. A defensive stop here, a corner 3 there, a forced turnover, a clean offensive possession. Little by little, the gap starts shrinking until suddenly the game feels completely different. Game 4 started exactly the way San Antonio wanted. The Spurs jumped out fast, built an early lead, and controlled the opening quarter. Throughout the series, New York had usually responded in the second quarter. This time, that response never came. Instead, the first half turned into a disaster for the Knicks. They found themselves buried under a 29-point deficit, while the Spurs delivered one of the most efficient offensive performances the finals have ever seen. The energy inside Madison Square Garden disappeared. The crowd that expected a battle was left staring at a scoreboard that looked impossible to overcome. San Antonio couldn't miss. They knocked down 11 of their first 18 three-point attempts, and by halftime, they had already broken the record for the most three-pointers made in a finals first half. At the break, they were shooting 14 for 26 from beyond the arc, 60% overall from the field, had piled up 18 assists compared to New York's 7, and committed only 2 turnovers while the Knicks had 6. When a team is beating you in shooting, ball movement, efficiency, and decision-making all at once, a 29-point deficit doesn't feel like bad luck. It feels like the game has already been decided. The halftime score read 76-49, one of the largest halftime deficits ever seen in the NBA Finals. Madison Square Garden was silent, and in most situations, that's where the story ends. Games like this usually turn into long second halves where everyone already knows the outcome. The only question becomes the final margin, but the Knicks have spent 2 years proving they don't operate like most teams. When the second half started, they weren't trying to erase 29 points in 5 minutes. They weren't hunting highlight plays. Their goal was much simpler. There was no giant momentum swing, no sudden avalanche of points that erased the deficit in a matter of minutes. It was possession after possession, slowly carving away at the lead until the game looked completely different. For the Knicks, the scoreboard wasn't the focus. The next possession was, and that's where San Antonio ran into trouble. The Spurs are terrifying when everything is flowing smoothly. When shots are dropping, the pace is comfortable, and the floor feels wide open. They're one of the toughest teams to deal with. But New York is built for something entirely different. They're built for chaos, pressure, and ugly basketball. Once a game becomes uncomfortable, everything starts tightening up. Every pass feels more important. Every shot carries more pressure. That's exactly the environment the Knicks want. San Antonio scored 76 points in the first half when everything was clicking. But once the game slowed down and turned into a physical half-court battle, the offense hit a wall. The Spurs managed just 30 points in the entire second half. New York held them to only 14 points in the third quarter. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic, but it was the type of quarter that quietly shrinks a lead while planting doubt into the minds of the team that's trying to protect it. Then came the fourth quarter. The Knicks held San Antonio to just 16 points, fought all the way back, briefly grabbed the lead, lost it, and then delivered the final blow when OG Anunoby soared in for a putback on a missed Brunson shot with only 1.2 seconds remaining on the clock. Game over. But here's the part that makes this comeback even more interesting. A next play mentality only works if someone keeps creating those next plays. In New York, that responsibility falls on one player. And the crazy part is that player hadn't even been playing his best basketball for large stretches of the series. Jalen Brunson entered this stretch shooting below 40% inside the arc and under 32% from 3 through the first 2 games. Yet somehow, despite those struggles, he remained the engine that kept everything moving. The reality is, Brunson hasn't looked completely dominant throughout this finals matchup. After shooting 19 for 56 across the first 2 games in San Antonio, the criticism showed up quickly. Suddenly, people were questioning his impact. The crowd saying, "See, Becky Hammon was right about him," got louder in a hurry. But the situation wasn't nearly that simple. On the surface, Brunson's numbers still looked impressive. Through 4 finals games, he was averaging 29.5 points per game, which sounds like superstar production. But once you look deeper, the picture becomes more complicated. Those scoring numbers came while shooting under 40% inside the arc and under 35% from 3-point range. Even those percentages got a boost from his home performances. Through the first 3 games, he had 13 assists and 13 turnovers, hardly the clean playmaking numbers people expect from a player carrying this much responsibility. The Knicks were also outscored by 13 points during his minutes on the floor. Meanwhile, New York outscored San Antonio by 30 points while he was sitting on the bench. A big reason was the workload. Brunson carried a massive 38% usage rate, meaning a huge chunk of New York's offense flowed directly through him. On most teams, if your star player is dealing with that kind of defensive pressure while putting up those efficiency numbers, you're probably staring at blowout losses and a series headed in the wrong direction. Instead, the Knicks are holding a 3-1 series lead. So how does that happen? Because slowing down Brunson was exactly what San Antonio wanted to do. The Spurs threw everything at him. Double teams, blitzes, extra defenders waiting as soon as he crossed half court. They packed driving lanes. They crowded his space. At times, they even pushed their defensive pressure farther up the floor to disrupt actions before they could even begin. And to be fair, parts of the plan actually worked. They slowed him down. They forced tougher decisions. They made every possession feel like hard labor. What they couldn't do was stop New York. Because the Knicks were never just Jalen Brunson. Everything starts with him. No question. He's still the player who organizes the offense and creates opportunities when nothing seems available. But throughout this postseason, New York has developed a dangerous twist that makes them much harder to contain. They don't need Brunson dominating every possession to control a game. Look at the wins in this series, and a pattern starts jumping out. Brunson's scoring role becomes less central, not eliminated, just distributed differently. Instead of carrying every possession himself, he shifts into other roles. Sometimes he's screening, sometimes spacing the floor, sometimes connecting actions that create opportunities for teammates. What looks like a defensive victory for San Antonio actually opens the door for everyone else. OG Anunoby starts finding open space and knocking down shots. Karl Anthony Towns starts attacking mismatches, punishing switches, and stretching defenders away from the basket. Mikal Bridges starts attacking closeouts, getting into the paint, and creating problems from the middle of the floor. Suddenly, the Spurs aren't dealing with one threat anymore. They're dealing with 4 or 5 at the same time, and none of that happened by accident. It's one of the biggest adjustments Mike Brown leaned into this season to elevate the offense. The roster wasn't built around one player carrying everything alone. It was built to create multiple problems for defenses at once, and that's exactly why San Antonio's strategy ended up exposing weaknesses elsewhere when the pressure reached its highest point. Make every possession uncomfortable, make every decision harder, keep applying pressure. Over the last 30 years, teams entering the fourth quarter down by 20 points or more had gone 4 to 747. One of those 4 victories already belonged to the Knicks from their comeback against Cleveland. Now they found themselves in that exact situation again, trailing by 20 entering the fourth quarter of an NBA Finals game. The odds were brutal, roughly 1 win in every 188 attempts. The chances of becoming the first team ever to pull it off twice in the same postseason looked even smaller. None of that mattered, because what happened next wasn't about probability. It was about the habits, discipline, and persistence that had defined New York all season long. And that's exactly why this comeback became something far bigger than just another wild finals moment. Bridges, Hart, and Anunoby were brought in to defend, bring toughness, and keep the team steady when things got messy. Towns was added to stretch defenses, create matchup problems, and punish teams inside. Every piece of this roster was assembled with moments like this in mind, especially when defenses throw everything they have at Jalen Brunson. Brunson still takes over on the ball when the situation demands it, particularly late in games when the pressure is highest. He's still New York's most trusted shot maker in crunch time, something he showed throughout this series and especially in Game 1. What's interesting is that the one game New York drifted away from its formula was the one game it lost. In Game 3, the Knicks leaned heavily into Brunson, creating nearly everything himself, and moved away from the ball movement and shared offense that had powered them through the postseason. Brunson still finished with 32 points on 11 of 25 shooting, but the offense became predictable. The rhythm disappeared. Possessions got tighter. Everything looked harder than it needed to be, and in the end, it wasn't enough. When Brunson has to carry the entire offense, the Knicks are still dangerous. When the entire roster gets involved around him, they're a completely different beast. That's exactly what happened in Game 4. Brunson finished with 36 points on 12 of 25 shooting, along with 7 assists, 3 steals, and only 3 turnovers across 44 minutes. But the biggest difference wasn't the final stat line, it was how he approached the second half. After halftime, he scored 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting while doing a much better job of trusting the players around him. He moved the ball quicker, he allowed the offense to breathe, he stopped trying to force every possession through himself while still stepping up whenever the team needed a big basket. Time after time, he knocked down momentum-changing shots that helped steady New York's comeback. That became the second major problem for San Antonio. The Spurs built their defensive game plan around slowing down one player. The Knicks built their roster so that slowing down one player simply creates opportunities for everyone else. In Game 4, that strategy came back to haunt San Antonio. If Brunson is the brain of this team, then OG Anunoby became the backbone of the comeback, and that's the development that should have the Spurs paying attention. With 15 seconds remaining, San Antonio still had control. They held the lead, they had possession, the rebound bounced out and found De'Aaron Fox. Everything was still in the Spurs' hands. Then OG Anunoby happened. First, he blew up the scoring opportunity with a huge defensive play. Then, after a reset and a timeout, he delivered the moment everyone will remember. Brunson launched a three-pointer. It missed. Anunoby flew into position and tipped the ball home with just 1.2 seconds left on the clock. Just like that, the comeback was complete. What made the moment even more impressive was how calm he looked. There were no wild celebrations, no dramatic reactions, no panic. Just a player who looked completely comfortable in one of the biggest moments imaginable. That calmness has quietly defined this entire series. Comebacks like this require players whose performance doesn't change when the pressure rises. Many players start rushing, others begin forcing shots. Some simply disappear from the game altogether. OG doesn't do any of that. Whether the Knicks are trailing by 29 or protecting a 1-point lead, whether it's the opening minutes or the final possession, he plays with the same approach every single time. The production stays steady, the effort stays steady, the decision-making stays steady, and that consistency has a way of holding everything else together. The timely cuts, the open three-pointers, the physical defense, the hustle plays. Nothing feels forced. Whether he's defending Wembanyama, switching onto guards, attacking space, or taking advantage of defensive rotations, he keeps making winning plays. In Game 4, it added up to one of the greatest playoff performances in franchise history. Anunoby finished with 33 points, 4 rebounds, 2 stocks, shot 10 for 15 from the field, drilled 7 of 9 from three-point range, and went a perfect 6 for 6 at the free throw line. Efficient, decisive, unshaken. During the first half, when nearly everything was going wrong for New York, his shooting was one of the few reasons the deficit didn't grow even larger. While the Spurs were rolling, Anunoby kept the Knicks connected to the game. And honestly, this hasn't been a one-night performance. He's been delivering versions of this throughout the entire postseason. Quietly, he's become one of the most important players on the roster. A stabilizer on both ends of the floor, a player who can impact games without needing constant touches, and now he has the signature moment to go with it, a finals game winner that will be replayed for generations of Knicks fans. He's even pushed his way into the finals MVP discussion. Through 4 games, he's averaging 23.8 points per game, and now owns the biggest shot of the series, because what Anunoby represents is what this Knicks team has become. Yes, talent matters, but execution matters even more. When Game Game 4 became chaotic, San Antonio started reacting to everything happening around them. The Knicks stayed disciplined. They kept running their actions. They trusted their habits. They trusted each other. That's not something talent alone can explain. It takes composure. It takes experience. It takes a group that has already been through difficult situations and learned how to function inside them. Right now, New York has that advantage. San Antonio is still trying to develop it. The Knicks looked like a team that had already survived moments like this before because they have. So was this the greatest finals game ever played? That might actually be the wrong question. Was it the biggest comeback in finals history? Absolutely. A 29-point deficit completely erased. A record that surpassed the previous finals comeback mark and produced one of the most shocking score reversals the sport has ever seen. From that perspective, it's historic. But when people talk about the greatest finals games ever, they're usually talking about championship-defining moments, games that directly decided titles, games that changed the course of basketball history. This wasn't that, not yet. This game didn't clinch a championship. It pushed a series the Knicks already led to a commanding 3-1 advantage, and that's exactly why it reveals so much about who this team really is. Game 4 didn't create a new identity for New York. It simply magnified the identity they've shown all season long. A team that stays connected, a team that refuses to quit, a team that keeps executing regardless of the scoreboard. Talent can help build a 29-point lead. Protecting that lead requires something bigger, and over the last 2 postseasons, the Knicks have repeatedly shown they possess that quality, which leaves one question hanging over the rest of this series. Can San Antonio adjust quickly enough to respond, or has New York already pushed this matchup beyond the point of recovery? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do the Knicks finish the job in Game 5, or can the Spurs extend the series and force another battle? Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out more coverage of this finals showdown.